On this episode of Supercars Talk, I go through how we're going to save money. It's no secret that spending in supercars has got out of control. Well, not so much out of control, but there's a big divide between the haves and the have-nots. Guys like Triple Eight and DJR Team Penske are up here on the spending, and then you've got Techno Team Sydney that's somewhere well under the bench here, and then you've got everything in between with that. I have heard that Erebus is spending somewhere around $5 million for the year for the two cars, kind of all up. And I think you're probably looking somewhere around that $10 to $12 million mark for a Triple Eight or a DJR Team Penske. And then I think you kind of had teams like Tickford are probably running around that, $12 million mark for the four cars. Kelly's were kind of 10 million for the four cars, so you're probably looking, for a reasonable budget, you're probably looking $2.5-3 million a year to run at the front and win the championships these days. You're probably more spending $4 to $6 million per car, and you probably, to do your Techno Team Sydney, run around the back of the grid and qualify the last kind of, basically every race, you're probably looking $1.5 million. So to go from, like the back of the grid to, semi front running team, your budget's, probably not a massive leap, but to be front of the grid week in, week out, it's then a big step. And what I'd like to see is, more cars being on a more competitive field, but also that you're encouraging guys to, step up from the development series, or, other people to step up, or teams to expand and things like that. Because I think if you were looking, if you could run a Erebus kind of thing for around that $1.5-2 million mark per year, and then, so a front running car runs at $3 million a year. I think you'd get teams, like Erebus would have no trouble putting on a third or maybe even a fourth car. You'd get guys like GRM being more interested in being, staying involved. Triple Eight might expand to four cars, things like that, and even people putting wild cards in if it's a lot cheaper, and if you've got one of my suggestions here, you will have the opportunity to have spare cars more sitting there ready to go, so it's a lot easier to go and put like a wild card on at Bathurst or something like that. So how do we save money, you say? Well, instead of getting the teams involved and everyone's little vested interests getting involved and wrecking things, someone needs to come along and just go, this is how we're doing it. If you don't like it, there's the door. Go and, play in TCR that no one cares about. So, first things first, I'll start with the engine. That is a big expense. Apparently, spending around 100k per engine. Rebuilds are something like 40 grand each. Big expense. They have brought the horsepower down on them this year, and so you can't use as many engines. What I say is, you can run your old engine, but they were going to bring in where you had an electronic throttle on it and that, so you could quite easily pare back the horsepower and that, so that everyone runs even. So you go, right, you can have your $100,000 Chev or Ford engine, whatever, but you have to run this e-throttle thing. We can bring the horsepower back to whatever we want, and they have a crate control engine, something like an LS3, or, maybe even to keep the Ford guys happy, we have an LS3 that goes in the Commodores at the moment, and you have a Coyote or a Barra that you can put in the Falcons, and because Supercars can control it, they can say, right, everyone makes the 600 horsepower, this is how we do it, level it off. But you have a crate engine option there, so that someone, say like a BJR, doesn't have to go somewhere to, spend $100,000 on each engine for the team. They can just go to Supercars, and Supercars has one engine builder that knocks them all out. And say you have them at a capped cost of, say 50 grand a year, and the engines aren't stressed or whatever at that, and you use about 2 engines per year. Maybe we don't have to control that. You say, right, you only have 2 engines and you have penalties or whatever, but you make the life of them so that essentially a team like BGR can go, right, we've got 4 cars, we need 8 engines for the year, there's 400 grand in engines for the year, no questions asked. If we do have one blow up, it's only another 50k, whereas at the moment they're probably, I'd imagine they'd have at least 6 engines in the pool plus the rebuilding and all that kind of stuff going on. And also these 50k engines, you can send them back to get rebuilt as well, and make it so that it's like a 10k rebuild or something like that. So if you do have one blow, you can send it back, get it rebuilt, you have the engines sat there, ready to go, no problems. All of a sudden there, your engine budget's in half. It means also that, say with the BJR, say they've got 8 engines in the pool at the moment, that they're not having to turn around tomorrow and go, right, they all just go to scrap and we have to buy a whole new heap and bring them in. That they can go, right, we're happy with the Chevs or whatever at the moment. We're going to leave them in Hazelwood and Percat's car for now until there's no life left in them. We're going to start bringing these, control engines in and put them in, Jones and Smith's car kind of thing. And, we run and, we work down our inventory like that. Then you haven't got that complaint, because this is a big problem at the moment, that the teams turn around and go, oh, well, we've got this big inventory that we don't want to just throw away. Well, you start working through it. The same can the development series, Super 2 series guys as well. They can do the same thing where they run through their allocation and then start putting in this crate engine. And it also, then if a new manufacturer wants to come along, they have the option where you can buy this Supercars crate engine, put it into your car, or you can go down the path of developing your own engine, but that you're not going to have, that you're not going to be able to build like a 700 horsepower weapon engine or whatever, that as soon as you've got too much performance, Supercars are just going to bring it back anyway. So you can have your DNA in there if you want, or you can just go out of this pool and buy an engine and keep it nice and cheap. If they're all being built by, one kind of house, it keeps costs down. And you can also, which this is one thing with all of these control parts, I think there should be a big Supercars parts truck at the track there. And if you blow up an engine on Saturday morning, you just go down and, go to the parts truck and go, here's my credit card, 50 grand, I'll take a new engine and chuck it in the car. Rather than then having, you don't have to carry a spare engine for every car. You can have your engines in the car, and it brings down all the costs with things like that as well. Chassis. Now this is a bit harder one to do my implementation thing. This is probably something that needs to be a bit of an across the board, right? We have a cut-off date. So the end of 2021, we go to the Gen 3 chassis, and that's it. All the old Car of the Future chassis, they become development series cars for a couple of years or whatever. But I think rather than having every team going and building their own chassis, what Supercars should do is buy one of these rigs that, like Penske said, he wanted to go and, build the chassis in America and ship them over, and Supercars said, no, we can't do that. Apparently they've got machines over there that, the machine does all the welding, and it costs them $2.50 to put a chassis together. And this is why the NASCAR teams have like 15 cars set there ready to go, and they have a super speedway car and a short track car and a road course car and, a Saturday car and a Sunday car and whatever else they have. Now, we don't need to get down, that kind of route where, every team has to have 15 cars. But if you have them machine built somewhere, who knows, say at the moment, I don't know, but say it's costing $100,000, say, to put together a chassis. If you've got a machine doing it from one place that's pumping them all out, you could be doing it for 20 grand or whatever. So in what costs you to build one chassis now, you could have 5. So, your teams, we'll use Brad Jones as the example again. Instead of having that massive kind of outlay there, they could quite easily have, 1 or 2 spare chassis ready to go because the cost is down massively. Then if you have a big accident, you're not so reliant on trying to build something up as quick or whatever because you've got one set there ready to go. But you could also, the Supercars parts truck, has a spare chassis set in there. So you could even, have the situation like, Bathurst where Chaz Mostert had that massive accident quite a few years ago now in the DJR car where they then, had to work crazy hours to get the thing back ready to go. You could essentially have a, spare chassis sat there in the Supercars truck or whatever, and you go, well, we just trashed this one, let's buy a new chassis and bolt all the bits to it, ready to go. I know there's some issues there with, entries and stuff, and you're supposed to use the same chassis over a meeting and whatnot. But if everyone's got the same bit of kit and something like that happens, it's better to have the car on track than not. One of the big controversial bits at the moment everyone talks about is the front uprights. This was the thing that Mr. Boost, Peter Adderton, got his knickers in a twist about, and kind of why Gary Rogers Motorsport is out of the sport now. So what I would say, everyone, all with a vested interest, we've got all this investment in these things and rah, rah, rah. Well, you can build your own ones, but Supercars is going to build a control component one. And at the moment, apparently it's about 50 grand to buy, for the front corners of the car. So $100,000 worth of front suspension. Say Supercars is going to build them for 10 grand each. You can go and buy the Supercar one for 10 grand, or you can go and build your own. The only catch with building your own one is that anyone can turn around and go, I want to buy yours for the same price that Supercars are selling theirs for. So, and you cannot turn anyone down. So you have 888 goes out and spends all this money building this new Butte one, and sure, with all the engineering and work involved, they're worth like 50k each. They're things of beauty. But then everybody, so Brad Jones Racing, Tickford, Walkinshaw, Kelly's, everyone turns around and goes, that one on 888 car, that's pretty good. I'm going to buy that rather than the Supercars control one. Here's my 10 grand. Thank you very much. And under the rules, the 888, you cannot go, we haven't had time to produce them or anything like that. If you've got them on the car, you have to be able to produce enough for everyone who wants one. So that all of a sudden then, why are you going to go and spend, $500,000 developing a new one that then everybody the next round can just turn around and buy that exact piece of kit? And also, to keep it fair, if you think that, 888's not supplying you with the same piece of kit as what they've got, you can turn around to Supercars and go, right, I want the ones off Jamie Whincup's car and he can have the ones off my car because I've paid my money, I expect it to be the same. I think all of a sudden it'll filter through that everyone ends up on the control component buying the same thing. Once again, the parts are in the truck ready to go. If you have an accident, you go and buy it, like Supercars has 50 of them or something sat in the truck ready to go. If anyone has an accident, you buy them rather than all the teams, having to produce them themselves or, buy a heap from 888 or whatever. And all this money's just sat there in spares. You have your centralised spares parts truck. With the amount I'm talking about, you're probably going to need 2 trucks. But everyone's buying from there. It's all fair. No one has an advantage. Now, there already is a heap of control components like transaxles and your gearbox, fuel cell, things like that, electronics. They're all control components, so this can all go into the parts truck as well. Some other things I think that should just be control components, because to me it just seems absolutely ridiculous that people are spending money on these things. Steering wheel. We're watching Triple Eights developing, GT3 style wheel. Why? That's nuts, because then if you find that there's an advantage with that, then everyone goes out and spends money. Everyone gets the same steering wheel, or maybe some drivers might prefer a smaller one or a bigger one, so you have say two versions of the steering wheel. You have a slightly smaller one, a slightly bigger one, whatever. Everyone gets the same pedal box, everyone gets the same gear levers and things like that, rather than teams having to develop their own stuff. Even the race seat, really, we could look at making that a control component as well, and then you do your own inserts for it, for your larger driver like me, or if you're a small driver, you put an insert in it or whatever. But it just stops. Okay, there's a couple of teams have probably got sponsorship deals with seat makers and things like that, but if you're pulling a heap of cost out of it, it all of a sudden makes it a lot better. And they all run the same fuel, but we've got a heap of fuel suppliers in the category. So to say like, oh, we've got this seat, deal, with Sparco or whatever, we're going to lose that because we have to use Recaro seat, say. You say, well, just stick a Recaro sticker on it like they do with the, some of the teams are sponsored by different tyre companies and things like that. It's not that hard. There's a lot of branding in it. But it takes a lot of cost out of teams having to develop their own stuff. And once again, you don't have to carry a heap of spares, and it's much easier if you want to have a spare car sat there if the costs are a lot less, which in turn puts more cars in the field, which is what we want. Now, this is probably going to be the most controversial one, aero. So instead of, Holden going out and building the Super Commodore and then telling Ford to do a better job of it, and then us getting the Super Duper Mustang, or the GT3 Mustang as they were calling it, what we do is, once again, Supercars does the aero. The manufacturer comes along and goes, right, say, let's make it 500 grand. The manufacturer hands over $500,000 to Supercars, and they do the whole aero for the car. So they've got all the figures of, what the Commodore or what the Mustang is, and say Kia comes along and they go, right, we want to race the Stinger, here's 500 grand. And Supercars makes it so the aero's the same as the Commodore and the Mustang. To entice some new manufacturers, because we definitely need that at the moment for Gen 3, what they could do is go, right, the first 3 manufacturers to sign up will cover the cost, of your aero stuff. So Ford wants in with their Mustang, Holden's obviously gone, the Chev thing's not going to happen. Toyota and Kia come along and say, yep, we want to be part of this. We're going to take this crate engine. We're going to hand over our 500 grand. And then, any of the teams can then go, right, well, you don't have the situation this year where you had with, Kelly's going from the Nissan to the Mustang, where that was a massive job to change that over. The engine stuff was just, that was mind-blowing, the effort that went into their engine program. Granted, they didn't have to do any of the aero stuff, but still, there was a big undertaking with that. Say, like, the Kellys then, wanted to go from a Mustang to a Toyota Camry, say. All they have to do is go, hey, Supercars, we want the aero bits or whatever, we'll throw in the crate engine, off we go. All the chassis are the same, so you can put your different engines in and things like that. You've got the same gearbox, you've got the same transaxle, all that kind of stuff. makes it a lot more simple to change something like that. Or, you know, a new manufacturer comes along, BMW comes along, and they go, right, we're going to go with Walkinshaw's, say, here's our 500 grand. You do all the aero or whatever. Walkinshaw's have got that going, and they go, hey, we want to do our own. We're going to do a 4-litre 8-cylinder engine or something like that. And, you know, Supercars goes, right, they come out with it and it makes 615 horsepower. Well, we'll just peg that back to 600. And then Erebus goes, hey, this BMW thing looks, you know, pretty good. We like, you know, the engine sounds a bit different. So they go, hey, Walkinshaw's, you know, we want to buy the BMW engines, so you got to sell them for the 50 grand that the, you know, control engine is at. And you go and get your aero bits and that from Supercars. You can make your own if you want to keep your, you know, composite department going and that. But you get all the molds and stuff from Supercars because they've done the aero map. It just makes it a lot more simple. And you don't have situations like last year where all of a sudden, because the Commodore was a lot better than the previous Falcon, and then the Mustang goes another leap, and then you've got guys like running around in Altimas that are just miles behind the pace. So then you've got, you know, your 2021 Mustang, and then say a 2024 BMW 3 Series or whatever comes in, and all of a sudden, because it's not the teams doing that aero, they make it to the Mustang levels, and then we can also turn around and cut a heap of aero out of the cars to make the racing better. That, to me, is just an absolute win-win-win. And you don't have the situation where, you know, maybe Holden spent $1 million trying to make the Commodore good. Ford might have spent $2 million. And then the next one down the line, you know, they spend $3 million. Can't get out of control because Supercars just goes, right, there's 500 grand to bring your new car in. You can choose the crate engine, or, you know, you can build your own. It just makes it a lot more simple. I think that we would see more manufacturers there, and, you know, a bit more diversity where you don't just have, like, you know, it was only Gary Rogers running the Volvo, it was only Erebus running the Mercedes, it was only Kelly's running the Nissan. You might have more of a situation like where you have 2 or 3 teams running each brand. That makes it look a bit better. You can, you know, BMW could turn around and go to Walkinshaw's, right, we're still going to give you $2 million a year then to run the car. Erebus gets nothing. Or you might go, hey, this is, you know, we're not getting a bad return out of, you know, we might feed Erebus $500,000 for the year to run our BMW kind of thing. And it gets, in my mind, that would get more manufacturers involved. You know, I don't see downsides to doing that, other than the fact that, you know, it takes away a potential advantage that, you know, the team that gets to, you know, homologate the car, like your Penske or your Triple Eight, takes away any advantage that they might have from doing this. But to me, that's only a good thing for the racing overall. So that's my ideas on how to save money. I've done all of this without a budget cap. Takes a heap of cost out of it. I'd love to hear if anyone else has got any ideas. I have got an email address, supercarstalk@gmail.com, or, you know, leave a message down below on that. Yeah, something that we need to look at because the money just isn't there, and I think there's going to be a reduction of money in the future. So until next time, I'll see you later.
I know the night has reached that stage again.